Some people just seem to have bad things keep happening to them. You ever notice that? I don't know how many of you remember Hee Haw, but they used to have this little song they sing. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. There are just some people who just seem to have that kind of life. There's a few people. There's a couple named Jason and Jenny Cairns Lawrence. They are from England, and they happen to be in the United States, close to the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001, to witness one of the worst terror attacks ever. They happened to be here. And so then they went back home, and in 2005, they happened to witness a terrible terror attack there in London to the transit system. Several bombs went off in the transit system, and they were there to witness that. And if that wasn't bad enough, in 2008, they went to Mumbai, and there they happened to witness the worst terror attack ever to happen in that city. And so, you talk about bad luck. One terror attack seems really bad, but 3 of the worst ever in those countries. One is Violet Jessup. She almost went down with 3 sinking ships. In 1911, she was on the Olympia when it went almost down. 1912, she was on, anybody guess? Titanic. Yes. And then in 1916, she was on the Britannic, which was another one that went down. 3 ships that went down, and she was on all of them, survived them all. So it seems only fitting that when she died of heart failure in 1971, they buried her at sea. It seemed only fitting. We're talking about bad luck, though. Isn't there 3s always seem to kind of come in 3s there? We have the 3. Robert Todd Lincoln was the son of Abraham Lincoln. But did you know that he was also present for 2 other presidential assassinations? When James Garfield was assassinated, he was right there and he witnessed it. When William McKinley was assassinated, he didn't see it, but he was in the same room and heard it. He later refused to meet with presidents because he was afraid of what might happen to him. And then there's Roy Sullivan. Roy Sullivan got struck by lightning 7 times. Okay? Now, statistically, getting hit by lightning is a 3,000 to 1 chance. Therefore, getting hit 7 times is about a 22 septillion to 1 chance. That's 22 with 24 zeros after it chance. And yet this man, 7 times. And one time he even got his wife involved in it. They were out hanging on clothes on the clothesline, and lightning hit and got both of them at the same time. But they both lived to tell about it. So sometimes some people just don't have any good things happen to them, it seems like, or bad luck just seems to travel after them. Today we're going to talk about a man who seemed to be unable to catch a break. But all the bad things that he went through set him up for something wonderful. Talk about a man by the name of Joseph. Now, a lot of times when you hear the name Joseph, the first thing you think of is the one who was with Mary, the stepfather of Jesus. Okay? But this is the Joseph in the Old Testament. Now, here's a little story about Joseph. Joseph was the next to youngest son of Jacob. Now, you might remember the story about Jacob, how he fell in love with a woman by the name of Rachel. And he had to work 7 years to be able to have her for his wife. And then on the wedding night, his stepfather pulled the old bait and switch. And he gave, instead of Rachel, he gave him her sister Leah because she was older. And so when Jacob discovers it, which I've always wondered, how did he not know? But when he finds it out, he's all upset, and the guy says, well, you can have her if you work for another 7 years. So he worked 14 years to finally have Rachel as his wife. But the thing was that because he loved Rachel so much, he really didn't care too much for Leah, even though she was his wife. And so it says that God allowed her to have children, but Rachel's womb was closed. And so she had all these children with Leah. And so Rachel got upset, so she said, here, take my maidservant, have some children with her. And so they had some children. And then Leah kind of got a little upset because she quit having kids. She said, well, here, take my maidservant. And ended up, he has 10 boys, all right, who from all these different women. But finally, Rachel gets pregnant, and she has Joseph, and then later Benjamin. And because these were the children of his favorite wife, the woman that he loved, guess what? They were his favorites. And Joseph especially was his favorite. And you remember what happened? He gave Joseph the coat of many colors. Now, I did a little research on that to find out what that meant. And basically what I found out is they're not sure what that means. Okay? They're not really sure what that coat of many colors was. Some think it was a coat that had maybe stripes of various different colors. The New International Version actually translated as richly ornamental robe. Some say it just means a robe with sleeves. Others said it was one that went all the way to his feet. All we know is it was something significant. All right? And the thing about it is, it was so special, his brothers didn't like it. They were jealous. And it says they hated him for it. Okay? And so his brothers didn't like it too well. Then Joseph has a dream. And his first dream is they're out in the field, and they're gathering up sheaves of wheat. And all of a sudden, his stands up straight, and all his brothers' sheaves of wheat all bowed down to him. And they said, "What? We're going to bow down to you?" And guess what? They didn't like that either. And it says they hated him even more. And then later on, he had another dream. And this time, the dream said that the sun and the moon and all the stars bowed down to him. And they said, "What? You know, Mom and Dad and all of us, we're going to bow down to you?" Well, they didn't like that either. And they hated him even more. So one day, Joseph's dad, Jacob, sent him to go check up on his brothers who were out in the fields taking care of the sheep and stuff. And so he sent him out there to check up on them. And when they saw him coming, he was wearing his coat of many colors. When they saw him coming, they decided they'd had enough of him. And they wanted to kill him. And so when he came closer, they thought about killing him. But Reuben said, no, we can't kill him. And so he talked them out of killing him. And Judah comes up with the idea, well, let's put him in this pit. And so they put him in a pit, a cistern that didn't have any water in it. And they left him there. And all of a sudden, here come these Ishmaelites. Now, I don't remember who the Ishmaelites were, but they were descendants of Ishmael, who was the first son of Abraham. Remember who he had with his handmaid when Sarah tried to rush things along? And so, in a sense, Joseph was sold off into slavery to his cousins, distant cousins. I don't know if you ever thought about that before, but that's kind of what happened. Because Judah came up with the idea, let's get some money out of this. Let's make some profit off of this. Let's not kill him. Let's make some money. And so they sold him to the Ishmaelites into slavery. And so he sold into slavery, and the Ishmaelites take him to Egypt, where he's sold to Potiphar, who is the chief jailer. And it seems like a pretty bad thing to happen to him. But guess what? Joseph was so handy. He was just very smart, and things. Pretty soon Potiphar put him in charge of the whole household. He was over everything and just took care of everything. And so things seemed to be going good for him again. But the scripture tells us that Joseph was well built and good looking. Okay? And Potiphar's wife looked at him and thought, he's well built and good looking. And she decided she wanted to get to know him better. And by know him, I mean in the biblical sense. And so she said to him, she said, come to bed with me. And he said, no, I can't do that. And she kept coming after him and trying to seduce him and day after day after day, until finally she came up with a plan, and she got everybody else out of the house. And she called him into her bedroom and said, come to bed with me. She grabbed his cloak. And you remember what happened? He took off, all right? He took off so fast that he pulled right out of his cloak. Now, a lot of people think he's naked. I don't know if that's true or not, but he took off. But she was really upset about that. And so she calls in the servants. She calls in Potiphar and says, I was here, and Joseph came in. That Hebrew came in, and he tried to take me to bed. He tried to seduce me. He tried to rape me. And she goes, here, look, here's his cloak. And so, of course, who are they going to believe? They're going to believe Potiphar's wife, or are they going to believe this Hebrew slave? So he gets sent to jail. So first he gets sold into slavery by his brothers, then he's put into jail. But while he's in jail, it's kind of interesting. Guess what? Again, he was really impressive in the things that he could do, and he ended up being the manager of the jail, taking care of all the stuff at the jail. And there were two of Pharaoh's, who was the king of Egypt, two of his servants there that had been placed there, and they both had dreams. And they came to Joseph and said, "Hey, we had this dream. We don't have any idea what to do." And Joseph told them. Okay, one was going to die, but the cupbearer, the king's cupbearer, was going to be found to be innocent and be brought back into his position. And the cupbearer said, "When I get back, I'm going to remember you, and I'm going to tell Pharaoh about what you've done and how you've helped me." Well, guess what? He gets out of jail just like Joseph says, and he forgets. And that's where we go to today. We're going to be looking at chapter 41, starting with verse 1. And actually, I want to read 40, verse 23. It says, "The cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him." Right? Kind of interesting. He just told him what was going to happen, and he just forgets about him. So this is what we read here. We're going to start with verse 41 and read through the verse 40. It says this: "When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled, so he sent for all of the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, 'Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged.' So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon where he had shaved. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it.' 'I cannot do it,' Joseph replied to Pharaoh, 'but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires.' Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile. When out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I'd never seen such ugly cows in all the lands of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dreams I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but none could explain it to me.' Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, 'The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh that what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all of the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." So we see here that Joseph goes from all these bad things to something really good. And here's the things I want us to learn from this. If we're going to have incredible faith, if we're going to have faith like what Joseph did, then there's some things we need to learn. First of all, Joseph trusted God even when bad things happened. He trusted him even when bad things happened. I want you to notice when Pharaoh asked him to interpret his dream, remember what he said? He said he couldn't do it. He said, God will give you the answer. You see, I think Joseph still had faith that God was with him and that he would enable him to give Pharaoh the right interpretation. And so his faith, even though he'd been through being sold into slavery, that he'd been falsely accused and thrown into jail and then forgotten, he didn't let that bother him. He kept him still close to God, that God could use him to interpret the dream. You know, Joseph could have been so bitter because it seemed that the dream that God had given him before, remember the dreams about his brothers bowing down to him? He could have been so bitter because he could see that, when's that ever going to come to pass? I'm in jail. I'm in prison. I've been forgotten about. I've been here for years. And he could have cursed God and he could have given up. But he didn't. You know, someone has said it's what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You've heard that statement before? Well, the scripture puts it this way. In James 1, 2-4, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the test of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Now that's the New International Version. I kind of like the way the easy to read version puts it. It puts it this way. "My brothers and sisters, you will have many kinds of trouble. But this gives you a reason to be happy. You know that when your faith is tested, you learn to be patient in suffering. If you let that patience work in you, the end result will be good. You'll be mature and complete. You'll be all that God wants you to be." See, I think Joseph understood that. He knew that he was going through some tough times, but he knew that God was still with him and that it was going to produce something good. Now, let me put to rest one statement that I hear Christians make quite often. And I think I've even said it myself. And that is that people will say, God never promised that we would have more than what we can handle. In other words, he would never give us more than what we can handle. That's not true. All right, that statement isn't true. God never said that. Okay, what that is, that's an assumption that comes from a misunderstanding of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, where it says, "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear." And see, that's where we get that idea that God will never give us more than we can handle. But that's not true. He says he'll never let us be tempted beyond what we can bear. In other words, we will never be tempted so much that we have to give into it, that we can't do anything but give into it. So we may have more than we can handle. But here's the thing. Even though we may have more than we can handle, it's never more than what God can handle. And that's basically the premise of the famous poem that you've heard probably, Footprints in the Sand, where the person talks about walking with Jesus and how they walked along, and then at the end they look back over the trail that they've been on, and they ask the question, Jesus, what's going on here? He says, in the nice places, I see 2 sets of footprints. But when it gets hard and rocky and we're down in the deep valleys and things, all of a sudden I just see 1 set of footprints. You know what? Remember what it says? It says, "Oh, my child, when the going was hard, that's when I picked you up and carried you." You see, that's the thing. God may allow us to have more than what we can handle, but He is big enough to handle it for us if we just trust Him. And even though Joseph was in prison, even though he got sold into slavery, God was with him. And he knew it. John Claypool was the pastor of the Crescent Hill Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And he had a little daughter with leukemia. She went into remission and everybody thought that God had healed her. But on Easter Sunday morning, she had a reoccurrence. And in his book, Tracks of a Fellow Struggler, he says his daughter asked, "Daddy, did you talk to God about my leukemia?" And he said, "Yes, we've been praying for you." And she said, "Did you ask him how long the leukemia would last?" What did God say? And he said, "What do you say to your daughter when you can't help her and the heavens are silent?" A few hours later, the little girl died. The following Sunday, John Claypool got up to preach, and his text was Isaiah 40:31. "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." And he said this. He said, "There are 3 stages of life. Sometimes we mount up with wings as an eagle and fly. We're on top of the world. Sometimes we run and we don't grow weary. We just go through the routine. Sometimes the best we can do is to walk and not faint." That's where I am right now. I need your prayers. At the moment that Claypool was his lowest, at his very lowest, he preached probably the most influential sermon that he had ever preached. You see, like Paul, he could say, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." And so if we're going to have that incredible faith, we trust God even when bad things happen to us. If we have incredible faith and we trust God when things just go bad. But God sometimes uses bad things to redirect us. Sometimes because we're going away from Him. You know, we've been with Him and then all of a sudden we kind of start straying away. And so sometimes God allows bad things to happen to us so that He might kind of redirect us back to Him. I've told you before about my arrest when I was in high school. I went to a party I shouldn't have been at. And the thing is that I'd been at the party, I'd left, and then I came back. And when I came back, I got arrested because the cops were there. And here's the thing. I always wondered, why did I go back? You know, there really wasn't any reason for me to go back. I was about ready to go home, and I was just going to stop by real quick to ask somebody something and go on. I could have waited till we went to school on Monday. But for some reason, I went back. And I wonder if God wasn't using that to redirect me. I was straying away a little bit, and He knew that, and He said, "You need to get back on track." And the way to do that was to give me a little trouble. Allow me to get into a little trouble. Hebrews 12:7 says this, "Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as His children. For what children are not disciplined by the Father?" And then a few verses down farther in verse 11, he says, "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it." See, God disciplines us just like a parent does. Sometimes He has to get us back on the right track. And isn't that why we discipline our kids? To get them back on the right track? It's not because we hate them. It's not because we don't love them. It's the exact opposite. It is because we do love them. We discipline them. And sometimes God does that to redirect us, to get us back on the right path again. But sometimes I think God redirects us to a path that He wants us on. Dave Earley, in his book, 21 Reasons Bad Things Happen to Good People, tells how, as a junior in high school, he had a great season and as a wrestler. He was a wrestler, and he had a really good season his junior year. So good that colleges were starting to come and look at him and were pursuing him and thinking about offering him a scholarship. And so then halfway through his senior year, though, he blew out his knee. Totally tore up his knee. And in just a moment, his dreams and his plans were shattered. The scholarship offers dried up. And he was frustrated. He wondered why God would allow this to happen, because he planned on using his athleticism, his ability to be a wrestler, to glorify God, to let people know how good God was. And so when all this happened, he was really frustrated and wondered why God would allow it to happen. But in the midst of it all, he tried to maintain a faith that God would use this for good. So he ended up going to a Christian college. And he wrestled there. But what was more important is that he heard the call to go into ministry. And he trained to go into ministry, and that's what he became as a preacher. To share the love of Jesus with other people. And he looks back on that now, and he thinks that God used that injury to redirect him. Instead of trying to go off into this direction he wanted, where his dreams and things were, he went where God wanted him to go. And God redirected him. So sometimes God uses bad things to redirect us to get to a place where he wants us to go. Think about that. Isn't that kind of what happened to Joseph? If Joseph had stayed home, what would he have done? He'd have been back there in the middle of a famine, starving with his brothers. And that brings us to our last point. You see, sometimes God uses bad things to position us to do good. To put us in a position where we can do something for his kingdom or for other people. You see, Joseph, he got sold into slavery. But he became the manager of the house of Potiphar. Then he was put in jail. And guess what? He became the manager of the jail. So that when it came time for someone to be put in charge of Egypt, to manage what they were going to do, as far as the famine, he was ready. He was prepared for it. And think about this. He was sold into slavery and sent to Egypt, where they were going to have the famine, where they were going to have the years of good, and a place where he could actually be involved. Everything was set up so that he could be at the right place at the right time to do what? To save his family. Because if you know the rest of the story, his family was starving. And they sent the brothers to Egypt. And guess who they had to come and ask for help from? Joseph. And guess what happened? They bowed down to Joseph. Remember the dream? They bowed down to Joseph. But they also changed. And he forgave them. And there was a great family reunion, and they all came there. And he was in the right place for God's people to come and have the food that they needed. Because God had promised a Savior was going to come through Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, and through Judah, the one who sold him into prison. And Joseph is the one who saved them all. Because God used those bad things that happened to him to bring about good. When you've gone through bad times, who's been the most help to you? Often it's people who've been through the same thing. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says this: Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles. Listen to this. So that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. Why does God let us go through rough times sometimes? So that we can help other people. You know, in like support groups, they're usually run by people who've been through the same thing. Because they understand. And bad things are going to happen, people. Bad things are going to happen. You know, there's a saying, and I'm going to clean it up just a little bit, but stuff happens. You know, stuff happens. And you see, part of God's sovereignty is not stepping in to protect us from this world. This world is tainted by sin, and bad things are going to happen. People are going to make bad choices. And sometimes things just happen. You know, you step just wrong on a rock and you twist your ankle. Or you fall and you break a leg. You know, I just saw a young man who I know that was out on the ice at work and slipped and fell. Now he's going to be off work for 4 months. Because he had to have surgery on his leg. Just going about, not thinking anything about it. Bad things sometimes just happen. And God doesn't always step in and stop it. And that's His sovereign will. He can. Sometimes He does. But a lot of times He just lets the world kind of go on. And so when bad things happen, we wonder, where's God at? He's there. But He's going to use those things. And we've got to trust Him in those times. That He's going to use those things, those bad times, those troubles that we have, to bring about good. You know, if we have incredible faith, we must trust God when bad things happen. Notice what it says in Romans 8:28. It says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Did you notice that? All things work for the good of those who love God. All things. The good and the bad work together for our good. Now, we may not see it, but we might. You know, we can trust Him because we know He is working for our good. Maybe it's to redirect us back into a closer relationship with Him. Or maybe it's to redirect to a path that He wants us on. Or maybe it's to position us to do good. So we just need to trust Him. So maybe you are struggling today. Maybe life has handed you a bunch of lemons. Now I'm not going to tell you go and make lemonade. All right? But what I am going to tell you is put your trust in God. Ask Him to show you what He wants you to do. Maybe you need to see if there are things in your life you need to change. Maybe He's trying to redirect your path to cut you in line with Him more. Maybe He wants you to head in a different direction than what you're headed right now. Maybe He has something He wants you to do. You know, it says in Ephesians that our works in advance that He's prepared for us to do. And so maybe He's trying to get us there to where He wants us to do those good works. So we need to trust Him. And He will show you what you need to see. Maybe not today, but I believe He will. We have people who are willing to pray with you today. These are people who have struggled too. You know, sometimes we think when we come down, these people aren't going to understand, but yeah, we all are struggles. We all have had problems in our life. We've all had some bad thing happen to us. Some have had maybe more bad things than others. But we've all had something that's happened in our life that we have struggled with. So we have people who are willing to pray with you about these things. We've all faced trials of various kinds. And we can comfort one another. So we're going to sing our song commitment. It's Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Because I really think that's it. When we're in the midst of bad times, when things are just going terrible for us, the thing to do is to look up to Jesus. And let those other things just kind of dim. So if you need some comfort, if you need some love, we ask you to come forward. We have people who will pray. Let's stand.